Hey guys, today's video is on the Rebirth Reliable R1 cast trucks. These are some cast trucks from China. They're pretty unique. There's nothing like them on the market. Why they're unique? They use a double Queenpin system to reduce slop, but they're the first cast truck in the market for downhill that has inline rear hanger, and that is pretty unique. You don't see that at all, pretty much, so that's sick. They're pretty exciting. No one has really made a good, and I emphasize good cast truck, good cast slalom style downhill truck that's going to be affordable to a lot of people. No one's ever made that. I know some of you want to type the Bear Gen 6, but no, they're absolutely trash. So these are the offering. They're trying to satisfy that gap in the market, and if they're good, if they skate well, man, like racing, going fast, being able to have a great setup is going to be extremely affordable. So there's a lot of promise, there's a lot of hope riding on these trucks, and I hope I've demonstrated to you guys why I'm excited. So some specs: hanger width is 131 to 135 millimeters. Base plate angles are 48 and 23 degrees in the back. And yeah, they use tall bushings. They cost about 70 euros, but I paid altogether to get them shipped to Kenya about 100 USD. If you want to buy them, you can buy them at the buy4.es website. It's a Spanish website. So you pay on there and then they get shipped to you. And yeah, you wait a couple weeks and they arrive. But yeah, my shipping situation is unique, as you guys know. So I've had these trucks for a couple of days, but this is in no way a review. I've only had like one session on them, but I've been constantly taking them apart, putting them back together, and there's a couple things that I've learned, some things that I really don't like, and I want to talk to you guys about it. In terms of performance so far, the trucks, when it all comes together, they perform pretty good. They're pretty stable. I haven't really taken them that fast, and take whatever I'm saying with a grain of salt, but they're pretty stable. They turn decently, and yeah, they feel good. But they do have a bit of slop, and that's what I'm going to be talking to you guys about today. So at the limit of traction, they do tend to lose a little bit of grip, and then in some scenarios they do perform inconsistently, but there are some things that I'm doing to them that hopefully can put them in a really nice working window where the performance is really great. In terms of bushings, what I'm running on these trucks is I don't have them on now, but last session I tried some 86A SHR tall barrels from Venom in the front truck, and in the back I didn't really have much to use, so I think I had the 97.5A crank tall barrels. So with these trucks, they have an extremely thin bushing seat, and what I've learned over the years is trucks that have a thin bushing seat tend to over leverage the bushings. So what you want a bushing that has a little bit higher rebound than standard to give you more support through the lean and to tell you what your truck is doing, or rather give you feedback of what your truck is doing when you have it compressed or articulated. So slightly higher rebound bushings should work great in these trucks. And also, similar to Ronin's, I find going up quite a bit in durometer, like going probably even as hard as 88A or 90A could be the move in the front truck, really up to your taste, but I find that gives me the best balance of stability, support through the lean, and nice, decent articulation. So yeah, that's how I have the truck set up. There's still a lot I want to do to them, so stay tuned for review. Probably gonna take a couple weeks. But yeah, there is one glaring issue with these trucks so far, and it's that they have quite a bit of slop, right? And that slop affects how I'm able to ride these trucks. When I run really soft bushings, that slop is very apparent. And even now with the harder bushings I have on there, the slop, you can still see it, you can still make that truck articulate in ways it's not supposed to. But yeah, that's what I wanted to talk to you guys about today. And yeah, so I like to call the slop zone, or rather the two stages of slop. There's the normal slop, and then there's when you enter the slop zone. So when you enter the slop zone, these trucks perform very inconsistently, and the slop zone tends to be at the limit of articulation of these trucks. I tend to feel it most when I'm doing hillside slides, less so when I'm doing toe sides, because I don't think I'm able to sort of get the trucks to articulate maximally when I'm doing toe sides. But with hillsides, I do get into the slop zone and they slide in consistently. They're harder to control. So yeah, anyway, let's talk about why we're getting slop in these trucks. So I did actually have a very long-winded explanation of what slop is, how it works, but I'm just gonna keep it brief. And yeah, so first of all, what is slop? Slop is the unwanted movement of your hanger on any plane apart from the axis that it's supposed to be moving on. So for example, if your hanger is supposed to be moving like this, if it moves like that, that's slop. You don't want any slop. Slop results in inconsistent performance of your trucks. It can give you wobbles. It can make you slide out suddenly. It can make your wheels lose grip suddenly. Slop is bad. When your truck has a good slop stopping mechanism or a slop stopping system, it really raises the performance ceiling of those trucks, and there's just so much more you can do. You have more confidence to go faster, you can grip corners harder. Like all in all, it's pretty good. You don't want there to be any slop at all. So where does slop tend to originate on for these reverse Queenpin trucks? So slop, in my opinion, originates for primarily two places. So the pivot cup and the bushing seat. And there are many ways of dealing with slop coming from those places. So with the bushing seat, you get a more restrictive bushing seat. You can develop a truck to have an insert bushing. In the pivot cup, you could just get a tighter, snugger fitting pivot, or you could have a skinnier pivot that works with a really like dense, hard pivot cup, and it fits really deep in there. And you could also elongate the pivot pin as well. And these are all some methods to reduce slop. So there's a lot of different ways to sort of make it happen. And of course, each way has its own disadvantages, but I want you to keep that in mind. Slop tends to come from the bushing seat and from the pivot pin, or rather the pivot cup area, if things aren't really dialed in all that well. All right, now let's take these hangers apart so you can understand how these trucks work, so you can sort of figure out where the slop is coming from. So you have your top bushing, take that off. You then get your hanger that has a very deep bushing seat, roadside. Take that off. And then your board side bushing seat is essentially pretty flat, like there's nothing happening there. You get a very thin bushing seat between the board side and roadside bushings, not all that thick. Here's where your Queenpin pivots are going to be resting on. These two things, 1, 2. You get your hanger, of course, that's done. Pivot pin, pretty skinny. All things considered, pretty skinny. Then you have your base plate. You have your two Queenpins, right? As you can see, Queenpins come off and it's pretty much a pin, like nothing too crazy about that. Then you have like this little rubber thing that goes in here. And the pivot pin, I put that upside down, I'll have to change that back. The pivot pins are quite skinny and they're held together by this sleeve that's here. You then have your pivot cup and it's pretty skinny as well, like the bore, or rather the hole is pretty skinny. And yeah, all right. So where exactly am I having issues with slop in this truck? So there are 4 opportunities on these trucks to stop slop, and I'm only really getting real slop stopping ability from one specific section, and that's the bushing seat. The Queenpins, I'm counting them both as individual slop stopping mechanisms, don't stop slop the way they should, and the pivot cup doesn't stop slop either. It does have quite a bit of room, and I'll talk about everything individually. So the bushing seat, I don't know if this is by design, but the bushing seat helps reduce slop in these trucks. That's both a good thing and kinda a bad thing. Ideally, it shouldn't need to stop slop. The Queenpin should be working perfectly, but they don't. So you do rely on the bushing seat to reduce slop significantly in these trucks. What this means is that you can't actually run really soft bushings. When you run super soft bushings, you then get, and you get to the maximum articulation, like, yeah, you tend to lose a lot of the stopping ability of the bushing seat. And also because you are running tall bushings, and because these trucks do lean a lot, even when you do run harder bushings, you do tend to lose some of that stopping ability at the hardest point of, maximal point of articulation of these trucks. So remember when I was talking about losing sort of the stopping ability when I was compressing the trucks fully hillside? That's because your bushing seat tends to be less and less effective. So yeah, the bushing seat kind of works, but you do tend to have to run harder bushings. And I am happy running 86A, 88A, and potentially 90A bushings in these trucks, but that shouldn't have to be so. I should be able to run softer bushings. But because the other slope stopping mechanisms don't work all that well, here we are. And then also because you do, like I said, tend to lose some of that slope stopping mechanism when you're at the maximal lean. That is something that I'm trying to dial out of these trucks, and I'm trying to dial it out with running cupped washers both side and roadside. Finally, because of the restrictive bushing seat, you lose some of the turn. I swear, I feel like the roadside bushing gets binded up when I'm articulating these trucks, and they don't turn to their maximal potential. Maybe there's a specific feel the manufacturer was looking for, and they do actually feel fine. They do turn pretty decently still, even with this restrictive bushing seat. But I don't know, maybe it would have been nice to have a different bushing seat or something that allowed a little bit more articulation out of the roadside bushing. The next thing that I'm going to touch on is the Queenpins and the pivot, but I just wanted to demonstrate to you how the Queenpins don't work and how it shows up. So you can pretty much like get these trucks to flex left and right. And I think that's because the Queenpin doesn't really sit effectively in the Queenpin pivot cup. Both of them don't sit effectively there at all. And also the pivot cup has a considerable amount of slop, but I will talk about both individually. And imagine I'm able to do this with my hand. Now imagine my full 80 kg weight and how that affects the truck. So yeah, the Queenpins don't fit effectively in the Queenpin pivot cup. I believe they've done this for a specific reason, which I'll talk about. But yeah, you get a lot of slop. So the Queenpin doesn't fit in the pivot cup all that well. Yeah, that sucks. But before I talk about that, you do get a little bit of movement in the Queenpin place. Like it does wriggle a bit. I don't know if you can see that well at all. Let me see if it focuses. Maybe you can hear it. There is a little bit of wriggly room. And then in the Queenpin pivot cup, like it doesn't fit all that well. There is a little bit of wriggly room as well here. Like I can feel it wriggling. And sometimes these do pop out. Let's see if it happens. Yeah, you see, they don't fit all that snug in there. So that's another source of movement. And finally, the pin itself doesn't fit well here. There is a little bit of movement here, and it does move back and forth. But I also think that's because of the pin design. So because they need the pin to allow the hanger to articulate on top of it, right, like this, they can't really have the pin fit snug the way it needs to. So yeah, it doesn't fit perfectly. And actually this articulation is kind of weird and kind of awkward because the hanger is pivoting on a pin and not on like a ball pivot like the Ronins have. They are updating this design and going for a ball pivot head. So I think that will improve the articulation and this issue. But yeah, the Queenpins have a lot of issues, and I think that's an area they really need to work hard on, figure out some solutions, make sure there's no lateral movement of the Queenpin itself, make sure it's articulating and fitting well in the hanger, all that stuff. And if they finally fix that, I think these trucks would perform perfect. So I really, really hope that they're watching this video and taking on board what I'm saying. Like I said, they're already updating the design, but I also hope they fix the lateral issues that I have pointed out. Also, I don't really understand why there are two Queenpin systems. I'm not really sure why there needs to be more than one. Ronins have one and they make it work. But I was talking to my friend David, and potentially it's because of the pivot slop. Unfortunately, there's also a considerable amount of slop in the pivot. My pivot does not fit snugly on the pivot cup, which does introduce a little bit of slop. And also, I've been comparing notes with my friends and we've been talking and messing around. Shout out David Serrat. I asked him if he could fit a spherical pin on his pivot, sorry, spherical bearing on his pivot, and he said he couldn't do it. But I clearly can fit one on mine quite easily. So I don't know if anything has happened. Like, for example, he got his trucks from batch 1, mine are batch 2. So perhaps there are some differences. But yeah, man, mine is much skinnier and yeah, I get a lot of slop and it is something that I can't feel when I am riding. So yeah, this is the pivot cup. I was able to get it out, fortunately. And yeah, it doesn't fit mine quite snug. There is a little bit of play. I don't know. Is there that much play? I swear it feels like there's play. But the other thing is that the pivot cup is quite soft, quite squishy. Maybe I'm tripping. But yeah, this pivot is quite soft. And I think maybe the solution around this is a much harder pivot. So it's not that apparent on camera. And maybe I'm realizing that I've made a bigger deal of this than it is. But yeah, there is a tiny bit of wiggle room. Maybe that's not as bad as I thought it was, but yeah, it's pretty bad in here when it's in here. I think the other thing, potentially, take this one with a grain of salt, is that the pivot cup might be too soft. So it's compressing quite easily when I leverage it side to side. There is a tiny bit of slop where it moves. And then like maybe because it's soft, it's sort of compressing even more. Yeah, I can kind of feel it compressing even more. Maybe that again is a source of slop in these trucks. So maybe that's something the manufacturer can work on. On other trucks, pivots do fit way snugger. So yeah, there's that. Yeah, look, I swear I'm not crazy. Like you can very clearly see movement in the pivot. Anyway. So yeah, I mainly wanted to make this video just to update you guys on my experience so far with the trucks, potentially point out to the manufacturer some of the slop issues I was having, point out to you guys as well so that he can go and make relevant changes. And maybe you guys in the comments as well have some advice that you can impart and give, and maybe even me, and things I could use to sort of fix them perhaps myself here at home. But yeah, I don't want to demoralize anyone. I'm very excited about these trucks. I'm very excited about, you know, the performance potential, what road it might lead down on. So yeah, I really want them to succeed. Because yeah, man, cast trucks, you know how much these guys are going to fuck up the game if they got this shit perfect. Like imagine all, like how more open and how much more safe downhill skating is gonna be, bro. We're all gonna be balling so hard, man. Anyway, it's exciting. So yeah, that's the end of the video. I hope I've articulated my points well. I've done this in one take. I don't know, man. I hope I've expressed myself well and accurately and represented the trucks. Anyway, I'm gonna keep scanning them and hopefully a proper review video in a couple weeks, depending on how things go.